Yeah, let's get to a fucking boomer talking big shit. Morning Joe slams DSA's extremist views and urges Democrats to call him out. Now this guy is ultra instinct, you know? This guy knows how to win races. Mr. Do not drop out Joe Biden no matter what is back again with another fiery hot take. You know, that movement that's like exciting the base for the first time in a very long time, making it seem like the Democrats are actually invested as a national party and solving some of these problems that people have been experiencing for the last couple of decades. You know, that group, the Democratic Socialists of America, a group that has now created some of the most popular politicians in the nation. Yeah, we should cut those guys out, says Joe Scarborough, former Florida Republican. Let's take a look.
Tomorrow to decide the Democratic nominee for governor. State Representative Francesca Hong is currently the frontrunner in the race, but the Democratic Socialist has faced scrutiny for past social media posts, including one calling for Thanksgiving to be canceled. Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, who has declined to endorse any candidate in the Wisconsin gubernatorial primary, weighed in on the race yesterday.
Francesca Hong, who is the Democratic Socialists of America supported candidate for governor. You haven't endorsed her. Are you going to?
No, I haven't endorsed in that race. My focus has been in winning back the Congress, winning back the House, and positioning ourselves to have the best chance possible to win the Senate. So I've been focused on those legislative races.
What do you make of this?
These races ultimately are local, and all politics are local. My understanding is that that Francesca Hong has made clear her present stances to her electorate.
Yeah, she's moved away from a lot of that.
Right, she's moved away from it. And I have a local city councilman that has this saying, woke one was crazy.
Woke one was crazy. Okay, that's interesting.
And I think that what's important is that we have to...
Everybody gets mad at this, but like, what is the, like, what... I think I was going to get into the woke one versus woke two distinction and stuff like that in a little bit, but like, I don't think this is the wrong assessment at all. I think controversial opinion here, but I think AOC is, you know, trying to move away from some of the more like electorally not great positions of the national platform, especially because this is a moment where it is virtually impossible in a contentious media environment to describe like police abolition or a prison abolition as a North Star, like as a idealistic goal to move in the direction of. I mean, I guess she could say that, right? I guess she could be like, look, there's always going to be certain, you know, constructive criticisms for any platform. DSA National is an organization that you know democratically votes on a national program, a program and a platform that they want to move in the direction of. I think one of the biggest problems of the Democratic Party is that we are lacking a vision, right? We're lacking a bold vision. And you know, let's be real. Regardless of my disagreements, you can't argue that the DSA's platform is bold. For far too long, we've only had bold, radical vision on the Republican side, on the reactionary side, Project 2025 and things of that nature. How about we put the working class and their needs at the center of our movement for once? How about we try to move in the direction of a more just and more equitable society for once? Like, she could say something along those lines, right? The problem there is twofold. One, I don't even know if she agrees with, you know, that national platform. Anyway, there's also a little bit of drama, I think, with DSA National and her local chapter, New York City. There's also the DSA left-right distinction. You know, there's a bunch of different points here, right? So I think that's part of the reason why she said this, but I don't have an issue with being I don't have an issue with the way she's communicating around this stuff. I don't have an issue with Francesca Hong communicating around this stuff by saying, like, look, I think like police abolition as a governor is not something that is in the cards for me anyway. So a lot of people, I think, looked at what she was saying as like running away from the ultimate goals of Black Lives Matter. And I don't think that's the case at all. And I certainly don't think AOC is making that argument. I don't think AOC believes that at all. I don't think she is doing that in any way, shape, or form. I think people are either looking at it charitably because they like AOC and assuming she just meant exactly what they feel, or they're looking at it uncharitably and assuming she meant something that they find to be really fucked up. I think that's what it is. Because this is an intentionally vague way of sidestepping the issue. And I've seen so many variants. I've seen so many different variants of the same back and forth. Maybe people were a little too woke scolding online or whatever, but the boiled down genuine energy and racial justice, feminist, LGBTQ rights, and abolition movements and more to woke one was crazy is just handing the right a free win and diminishing real political energy. Yeah, I see. I don't see it as that. I don't see what she said as that at all, especially because I think AOC is too woke. I've talked about this before. I think one of her weaknesses is ironically that she is too like academically woke. She leans into the woke scold stuff maybe a little too much. She originally was the one who was mad about Bernie going on Joe Rogan, right? We were at odds with her at the time, right? So that's not, I don't think she's saying like fuck racial justice and LGBTQ. That's crazy. Like I think when you say, oh, woke one was a little crazy, we got a little out of hand or whatever, we were looking for real solutions, and maybe people were very excited at the time to take on certain positions. When I say that, I mean radlib tendencies, a lot of which still haunt me, a lot of which people associate with me on the internet. People think I'm the king of woke 1.0, that I was Mr. Radlib, right? I never was. I have a pretty open mind to unlimited progress, but I also understand how people operate. Like I never did the Latinx thing. I never did the folks with an X thing, right? Like, but I don't disparage people who did. I understand that they were trying to be as empathetic as possible. But ultimately, these sorts of things they're inconsequential, right? I think they're inconsequential. I don't think it shows that you're like a bad person or silly or ridiculous, and you should be punished for doing that. Like, who gives a fuck? Whatever, dude. Whatever. That's my opinion on this. But I think when people talk about woke 1.0 versus 2.0, I think that's mostly what like people like AOC are referencing, where it's like, you know, we tried a bunch of things. Some of it was, a little bit annoying and that's it. And I would still far prefer a little bit annoying on the empathetic side to whatever the fuck unlimited neo-Nazi shit is going on right now, right? But we also have to be, because we're marketing our positions, right? This is something that I stress all the time. Like this is if you want to build a mass movement, you got to speak like the masses, you got to speak to the masses, and you got to be where they're at, and you got to lend a helping hand, right? And a part of that is also not leaning into certain inventions of academic circles when you're communicating. I think Abdul does a very good job at this. I think Bernie has always done a very good job at this, even though on the other side, Bernie has also sometimes come across as like not being as invested in black issues, which is very important for American politics, not just to like win Democratic elections, but just important in general. So I'm a little bit of a centrist on this woke stuff in many respects. I'm a little bit The reason why I'm using Latinx as an example is because it's an easily identifiable one that pretty much everyone now recognizes was like a little too performative. Can we say that? Can we say it was a little too performative? You know? Is that appropriate? Because I always saw it as such, but I would never disparage Amy Goodman, who used Latinx, and I think she still might use Latinx. I have respect for the elders. I have respect for the people who are kind people, empathetic people, who are organizers, who maybe use some of this academic language and want to do right, want to help people. I just don't think it's the best way to market. That's it. That's it. That's all. That's my assessment. Right? I will never make a mountain out of a molehill in either direction, though. I'm not the type of guy who will be like, you can't call the master bedroom a master bedroom. You call it a primary bedroom now because woke killed it. And then that's my North Star. That's the only thing I care about. Right? That's why I say I'm a centrist. I'm a centrist with this stuff because I think it is ultimately immaterial. Okay? It has nothing to do with anything. It's just not the best marketing technique. But having said that, if that's your only output, like Zaid Jilani is a great example of one of these guys that I sometimes find myself in agreement with, but in many instances find him to be a little bit too hyper-focused on woke shit, culture wars. Like, I am not someone who gives a fuck about culture wars in any way, shape, or form. I don't care. One way or another, I don't care. Like, I think there are people who make it their life's mission to be on one side or the other of culture wars. And I think both of those sides are still very much involved in culture wars. I am involved in class warfare. Okay? I find culture wars to be an unnecessary distraction. This doesn't mean that racial issues are inconsequential. This doesn't mean issues around transgender folks are inconsequential. It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't mean that we should just like cast aside black issues or trans issues, right? Never that. But the hyper focus on the identity of everything, the hyper focus on the culture wars, whether you're against it or for it, I think it's ultimately unproductive. And that's always been my attitude. That's been my attitude during Woke One. And I'm glad that people are kind of moving away from that a little bit, especially because people are post-October 7 a lot more aware of how cynically this is deployed, because so many people saw anti-Semitism and the feelings of Jewish people be placed as the primary way to silence the opposition against Israel's war crimes, against Israel's genocide. And I think that played a big role in waking up people to that reality. Now, of course, if we let it get out of hand, then they become anti-culture war warriors, and that's bad too. That's also fucked up because, again, it goes back to the same issue. We want to improve people's lives. We want to uplift the working class. We want to offer the American working class an opportunity for a better future. That is what we care about. Okay? T. Blasian says, Woke One obsessed over liberal aesthetics to the detriment of actual societal and policy change that black people wanted, so we're already fucking irritated when it comes up. The fact that you make the distinction doesn't mean others will, and we've seen this our whole lives. Why would we expect it here? Why would we trust people to make that distinction? No, I understand it. I'm just telling you what my position is. You know? And this has been my position. Look, T. Blasian, you've been in here for 68 months. You've probably seen me at the peak of woke being like, you guys are getting a little out of hand. I don't mind it. It's fine. But like, let's, dial it back a little bit. It's fine. I hate that shit because it was taken by white people, misused by white people, and discarded by white people after they hollowed it out. Shit's the biggest turnoff to black people. To see our culture co-opted, our mass movement betrayed and abandoned and tossed aside under the same umbrella as crazy tweets. Because now that it's been conceded to the right that some was too much, that's what centrists will do. Yes. Of course, that's not my position, and I think we should always oppose that, right? I've always talked about, you are doing that? No, I'm not doing that. I think you guys are misunderstanding my position if you think I'm doing that, because there's never been a moment where I backed away from defund the police. There was a lot of people who said like, oh, well, optically speaking, it's just like a bad way to describe a position. No, it was just bastardized efficiently, chopped away at bit by bit by the reactionary movement at the time that was pro-police, pro-police brutality. And then liberals basically fucking put the cork in it, right? Liberals took the right-wing framing on defund the police. Defund the police was a totally normal and totally valid position to have. These are some of the most expansive budgets that localities have. At a time when your library's in a state of disrepair, when your schools are not getting the adequate funding, we're just giving the fucking local law enforcement in Springfield, Ohio, another fucking tank, an MRAP. The fuck? No, demilitarize that shit. What are we doing? And offer police accountability. Take away some of the funds that they were supposed to get and put it into social services that will actually have a positive impact on reducing the crime rate in a much more resilient manner. That's what defund the police was about. The problem is liberals absolutely conceded to the right-wing framing because they were antagonistic towards it. They are also, like, liberal politicians did not want these necessary changes that people were demanding. You understand? I was there. I was covering it every fucking day. But that's not the distinction between woke 1.0 and woke 2.0. That's a totally separate issue. I think, like, when we talk about woke 1.0, what I mean and what a lot of people broadly mean is when, you know, people were doing the call out culture and presenting themselves as all or nothing and saying like people do not have an ability to change, like this kind of thing, right? That's all it is. That's all it was. We have the opportunity. We have a fairly large community of progressive people. We have an opportunity to frame it appropriately. So I'm trying to use that to the best of my ability. It's not a separate issue. It's literally the question AOC was being asked when she said this is 100% about defund and its abandonment by DSA elected officials. First of all, it's not about defund. It's about police and prison abolition. Okay? It's police and prison abolition, which is not something that even like DSA electeds are going to lean into unless it's like Chris Rabb or many others, right? Like there are some who will push for it, and I really respect them doing that. But this was packaged as like Thanksgiving tweets and police and prison abolition as the national platform. So it's a lot of different things.
That has this standing.
Here, let's
I haven't
in
endorsed in that race.
The race yesterday.
America supported candidate for governor. You haven't endorsed her. Are you going to?
No, I haven't endorsed in that race. My focus has been in winning back the Congress, winning back the House, and positioning ourselves to have the best chance possible to win the Senate. So I've been focused on those legislative races.
What do you make of this?
These races ultimately are local, and all politics are local. My understanding is that that Francesca Hong has made clear her present stances to her electorate.
Yeah, she's moved away from a lot of that.
Right, she's moved away from it. And
yeah, I think this is like, you know, talking about everything broadly. I don't think it's like defund at all. If I remember correctly, I don't think this was even about defunding the police at all. And Francesca Hong's platform still heavily features police accountability. So I don't know why you guys feel like she's running away from that. If you were to ask AOC directly, I don't think AOC would ever speak out against like police accountability or restructuring the way that we fund local law enforcement. Yeah, it's being packaged with like Thanksgiving tweets. That's the problem. So people are doing what they always do, which is understandable. People are taking away what they want to take away from this conversation. If you're like uncharitable to AOC, you're thinking, oh yeah, she's positioning herself as being a moderate so she can win the broadest electorate. She's doing the classic thing. She's doing the classic thing. She's abandoning us. She's abandoning the DSA, that sort of thing. I don't think that's what they're doing. I don't think that's what they're doing at all. How the fuck do you literally look at ABC News and think she's talking about academic bullshit? Also, woke one was crazy, came from a black man. I think it's time to contend with the fact that leftist discourse has leaned into monolithic thinking more than people are comfortable considering. I mean, there's definitely a lot of black progressives who, like, there's like 18 different conversations happening on this, unfortunately, as always. And especially in this clip culture environment that we live in now, it's impossible to have a long-standing, nuanced conversation about these sorts of issues, and it's never going to happen. But I will still try to do my very best. Like I described it early on in the beginning of the broadcast, but I guess I'll repeat it one more time. Woke as a concept initially originates from the black community. And woke as a concept in like leading into the 90s was very different than woke as a concept post 90s in the black community. Early on, it was about hoteps, right? Like hotep style, like woke guys, right? Unks. And then it turned into being aware of white supremacy, being awake to the realities of white supremacy and anti-blackness, right? And then in the 2014 leading into like 2021 era, okay? No, it was not. Who told you that? No, I'm saying like the OG concept of wokeness was like that. I'm right about this. You guys don't know. You guys don't know the history of it, I think. Highly inappropriate use of hotep? No. Stop taking the biggest L you've had all fucking year and just play the clip. What? That's not even the main point that I'm trying to make. No, I think FD Signifier said the same thing as well. Don't listen to what that chatter is saying. Longtime black chatter here. Yeah, the unks know. Okay? The unks know the truth. We ain't got to tell everything to everybody all the time. Your audience is too white for this. Yeah, I know, but like, you know, I'm trying to be their Sherpa a little bit, you know? But yeah, old heads, like the origination of wokeness is very different. It's a totally different concept at its inception, as its origination, and then even internally within the black community, it turned into like, you know, from Nation of Islam, Hotep stuff to like, you know, just being aware of white supremacy, and then it moved into. And then stop unk jacketing people. That's so funny. Unk jacketing. So then it turned into something entirely different when it got mass adopted, right? And this is something that happens with virtually every term that we now use. It almost always comes to the black community, queer communities, right? Like, and then white people start using it. Everybody starts using it. And then it basically gets bastardized along the way. That's just how it goes. And as I was saying earlier, it's the same as like, you know, the terms that we would never think came from the black community, like cool, right? So it gets whitewashed, slay, ratchet, right? So basically it gets mass adopted, and at that point it evolves into something entirely different. So in the early like 2010s, leading into the 2020s, it was wokeness basically became broadly progressive, right? That's what it meant. That's what people were using it as. That's what the masses were using it as, right? Just meant broadly progressive. It wasn't like a total bastardization of the way that at that point, the way that the black community was utilizing it, but it wasn't like specific to anti-blackness and specific to white supremacy. It was just everything else, right? It was broad. It was broad progressivism. And then the right-wingers started using it in disparaging ways. They associated it with right-wingers in the reactionary movement broadly started associating it with anyone that has empathy at all. Okay? Anyone that has empathy for anybody that's not themselves. And it turned into this dog whistle where it flipped back and it was like, oh, you're woke. And for, I think, some in the black community, that dog whistle was just a replacement term that white supremacists and reactionaries were using for black and blackness and black culture and black issues, which is understandable because in many respects, because the origination of the term woke was correct, right? That is the underlying principle of a lot of reactionary movements in this country, associating everything with blackness and even brownness, but specifically anti-blackness as like the primary vector of hatred for the old reactionary movement and the contemporary reactionary movement. It's never really changed, right? So therein lies the problem. There's the euphemism treadmill, the etymology of the term, and how people understand it. And given that we now exist in these like isolated silos, especially on the internet, many of which are right-wing, many of which are reactionary, and that a lot of the right-wing commentary actually ends up dominating discourse or leading discourse rather, there's this like two different conversations, or maybe even certain instances, like 10 different conversations happening in real time at the same time. And people are just like speaking over one another. That's the issue. That's the issue here. And a lot of people are associating it with, like woke one with like all of the advocacy. A lot of people are associating woke one with all of its advocacy, including Black Lives Matter, including, demands to end police brutality, police reform, restructuring the way we fund local police departments, and taking away some of those funds and giving it back to social programs and social safety nets in an effort to reduce the crime rate by tackling poverty, which is the most resilient way to eradicate crime. And that's not the case. I don't think AOC is advocating for that at all. I think, if anything, she is still very woke. So that's it. That's what I think that's what a lot of people are misunderstanding here. Right? That's what a lot of people are misunderstanding. And I think part of that stems from how many failures we have experienced. I mean, I've talked extensively about the amount of apathy that came from the youth movement in the aftermath of the assassination of George Floyd in the hands of Derek Chauvin, as, 4 or 5 officers looked on and didn't do a single damn thing. It was filmed by 42 different camera angles, right? And the discourse that brought, and the anger and the resentment that people had, righteous anger that people felt in their hearts. And what's interesting about that is people went out, they protested. Some of these protests, because of the police brutality that they experienced, turned into riots at times, right? Some of them did. But people ultimately did the right thing. They protested, they exercised their First Amendment rights, they made their demands very clear. And what did they see from the Republican side? They saw hatred, anger. You want to kill cops? Fuck you. You're all terrorists. We have to brutalize them further. And from the liberals, they saw a conciliation or a conciliatory tone to the right-wing framing. What was the first thing that the Democratic Party did when the calls, the decentralized movement of Black Lives Matter that became an international movement, the calls were to defund the police? This wasn't a demand being made by NGOs. This was a demand being made by the streets. Democrats kneeled with the kente cloth. Total aesthetic nonsense. And then they created their alternative justifiable legislative package, right? Which was already bullshit. That legislative package was 8 can't wait. Okay? Not only did they engage in the performative pandering, but then they also turned around and gave us a legislative package that was totally diluted. They did that on purpose. They did that to neuter the movement, right? We got murals, but we didn't get policies. And even the policies that the Democrats, the legislative package that the Democrats actually brought forward, that was already super conciliatory to the demands being made by the Republicans, even that legislative agenda never got passed. So then what did people do? 2020 rolls around. We got an old, decrepit, racist man running for president. His name is Joe Biden. It was another big fuck you to the movement. It was another big fuck you to the activist base. It was another big fuck you to the streets and the demands that they were making. The architect of the crime bill, running on funding the police more. That's what Joe Biden ran on. And he was backed by Jim Clyburn. Jim Clyburn played a major role in his election. Okay? Jim Clyburn played a major role. The South Carolina victory that was inevitable was presented as this amazing underdog story where finally the scary Bernard Sanders was eradicated by the establishment Democrat that all black people wanted. It wasn't all black people that wanted Joe Biden. There were plenty of black people that wanted Joe Biden. He was the vice president of Barack Obama after all. There were a lot of young black people that didn't want Joe Biden. They got cast aside in the same exact way that anti-Zionist Jews get cast aside in the media. They never get talked about. You'll never hear from an anti-Zionist Jew in mainstream television. There's a reason for it. Just like you will never hear from a young black leftist in mainstream television, because it doesn't fit within the neat confines of permissible messaging. Okay? But in any case, people plugged their noses, myself included, and voted for Joe Biden. We wanted to get Donald Trump out. We knew how dangerous Donald Trump was. And then none of the marginal changes that were presented to us were actually implemented. How do you think people feel after that? How do you expect people to put faith in the system when they did everything by the book? They went out and they protested. They exercised their First Amendment rights. And then they exercised their civic duty and voted. They plugged their noses and they voted for the guy they knew was far too old. And nothing came out of that. No changes came out of that. Just murals, no policies. That breeds apathy. Of course that breeds apathy. That's precisely what happened. So all of that was by design. The establishment, whether they be Democrats or Republicans, rely on your apathy. They want to show you that your initiatives are not worthwhile. They want to prove to you that changes will not happen. Perhaps that's a big part of the reason why they're so angry at the Democratic Socialists of America right now, because the Democratic Socialists of America are showing a different vision. The Democratic Socialists of America actually care about these issues. They're not directly associated with the Democratic Party. Their goal isn't to sanitize the Democratic Party. Their goal is to put a platform first and push for that platform. Perhaps that's the reason why they're so angry at this. I think that is the reason why they're so angry at this. Both the Republican politicians and their consultants on one side and the Democratic politicians and their consultants on the other side are terrified of our movement. But they're not just terrified of our movement. They're not terrified of me. I'm just one guy. I'm a media figure, right? I'm a mouthpiece, a megaphone for your resentment and your anger. What they're primarily terrified of is democracy. They're terrified of the democratic process. They're terrified of having to face the masses. And we've seen this. We've seen this in the last 3 years since October 7, 2023. The attitude on Israel changed dramatically. It changed dramatically, and now people are demanding these changes. But there is unbelievable amounts of enmity towards those demands coming from the masses. They're trying to plug their ears. The establishment on both sides are terrified of hearing what you have to say. And the more we become undeniable, the harder it gets for them to refuse to hear our demands. That's why the electoral process still matters. That's why they're pushing back so hard. That's why they're pushing back against me. That's why they're pushing back against our movement. That's why they're trying to do their very best to nip this in the bud before it gets out of hand, before 2028 comes around and the national conversation is very different. Sometimes people at the DNC directly plug their ears. I remember. So yeah, as far as woke 1.0 versus 2.0 goes, I think our politicians, whether they be AOC or anybody else, they're not running away from progress. I don't read it as that at all. I think they're trying to go back to a more Bernard style attitude where it's just policy first, a more serious attitude. That's the way I read it, at least. That is the way I read it. I don't read it as anything but that, especially from AOC, who is, I would say, a little bit too invested in the rad lib tendencies and the way that she communicates still to this day. So their pragmatism isn't to moderate on their policies. Their pragmatism is to moderate on their comms, on their communication. And unfortunately, in our modern reality, bourgeois democracy and all, the only thing we can associate with, the only thing that we can put our teeth into, sink our teeth into, the only thing that we see as tangible is optics. And that's why it becomes a big deal for a lot of people when there is even a subtle optics shift, even if it's actually a positive optics shift. Hassan's new pharmacist. I'm infinitely proud of Dr. Jihad right now. I wish he'd just make these points more regularly when this shit comes up. Redirecting to larger persistent systemic issues would prevent it from being misunderstood. I mean, I can't do a 25-minute rant on how post-BLM, the lack of interest from the lack of interest from the establishment Democrats and the establishment Republicans led to tremendous apathy every single time. You know what I mean? It's something that you've probably heard me explain before, but it's just hard. It's hard for me to do that every single time. It's a 25-minute rant. Feel me?
I have a local city councilman that has this saying, woke one was crazy.
Woke one was crazy. Okay, that's
and I think that what's important is that we have to assess what
was it. I mean, did the movement go too far?
That may be a quote. That might be the newsletter quote of the day.
It's a T-shirt.
Woke one was crazy.
Yeah, you've got your headline.
Woke one was crazy.
Hong faces a challenge from Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, who was endorsed by outgoing Governor Tony Evers.
All right. So listen, Jonathan Lemire, first of all, there's no great conspiracy here. The reason why more people are talking about the DSA right now is because you have the mayor of the most important city in America who, first of all, is identified as DSA. He's proven to be, I think, extremely pragmatic in many ways. And while there are a lot of people...
I'm sorry, what leads you to believe that Democratic Socialists are somehow antagonistic to pragmatism? Yeah, he's been pragmatic. Yeah, he wants to get shit done, my man. What are you talking about? What the fuck? Why is the automatic attitude that, like, of course, these guys are pie in the sky idealists. They can't be pragmatic at all. Okay, I agree with you on your view, but if these electeds are doing it, I don't trust the left to be disciplined enough to maintain that message because centrist media still has influence and messaging power. Just look at the absolute mess that dark woke is edgy white liberals lashing out with stereotypes and slurs at Republicans instead of disciplined advocacy. Yeah, I think there is that element of it too, but again, it's vague. It's too vague. Like, what does dark woke mean? Does it mean like you're allowed to say slurs now as a white guy? No, of course not. That's not my attitude on it. But does it mean that you can be like, I have been dark woke before dark woke was invented. You know what I mean? Like, this is the headquarters of dark woke. 90% of the fucking clips that Republicans slam all around and centrist Democrats lean into, those are dark woke moments where I'm just like yelling at a white supremacist or someone who is personally tokenizing themselves to be a soldier of white supremacy. And I'm just like, suck my dick, old lady. And they go, oh my God, he's saying that to an old Asian lady. Meanwhile, they don't listen to the fucking message of the old Asian lady. The old Asian lady is not just like some random geriatric. The old Asian lady is literally saying, fuck immigrants. Donald Trump is my president. You need to vote for Donald Trump. You know what I mean? Or even like the anti-blackness messages, right? Like that's one of the classic ones. That's one of the classic ones that people always go to, and it actually plays such a great role because I'm white. I read as white, so when you see like a auntie or an unk that doesn't understand internet culture at all, and you see a white guy be like, I don't give a shit about this, or even like the tone I take when I say black with a hard B, people immediately assume that is just another white guy who thinks he knows better than someone's lived experience and a black person's lived experience. I've never made that argument, right? And I never will. So that is the problem. It works well. It works well for some people in the base. Being against defunding the police is that exactly? First of all, when the fuck did I say I'm against defunding the police? I've never said that. Hello? I have always explained that I am in favor of it, and I think it's the right thing to do, and that it was given up as a message by established Democrats because they were not in favor of it. And they were the ones who landed tremendous attacks on defund the police, and they allowed that message to be bastardized. Black Lives Matter, in the same exact way, was attacked by Republicans first. Okay? When people said Black Lives Matter, what did Republicans go? Oh, you mean white lives don't matter. You mean police lives don't matter. Blah, 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 blah. What about all lives matter? All lives matter. But liberals, who were also antagonistic initially, like liberal Democrats, Democratic establishment under Obama when BLM first started, who were actually antagonistic to BLM, decided not to play that game when Donald Trump positioned himself as being anti-BLM during the Kaepernick protests. That's when the liberal attitude broadly shifted to favor Black Lives Matter. And because liberals consolidated around that message, they explained what it was. And that's why nobody believed the right-wing reactionary framing on Black Lives Matter. Whereas with defund the police, liberals did not allow that. There was no consolidation around defund the police. Liberals immediately were like, this is bad. This is not us. This is not us. Fuck those guys. Right? That's usually how a slogan invented by or policy prescriptions invented by the masses get destroyed. If there is if the Democratic establishment leans into the right-wing framing on the issue, on the agenda, they give the reactionary framing legitimacy. Okay? And they certainly did that with defund the police. Because defund the police is the dumbest messaging possible? I don't think so. I never thought so. You wouldn't think that way either if liberals explained what defund the police meant. That has always been my position. These are just slogans. Slogans that are supposed to identify key policies. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. Zohran Mamdani. Zohran Mamdani hasn't been great on cops. Let's be real. I will say that. However, Zohran Mamdani literally said, "Oh yeah, I don't believe in defunding the police." And then he would just simply say his opinion on policing is that it's a really tough job, and that we shouldn't increase the head count, and that we should instead hire social workers for some of these calls to reduce some of the bandwidth or some of the tiresome work that the police engage in. They shouldn't be going to all these calls. It's crazy. You know, they're supposed to be solving crimes. That's a big deal. That's a huge issue. And then also, we should be funding some of these social safety nets. That's defunding the police. And everyone was like, that's beast mode. I love that. Thank God he dropped the slogan. Yeah, he dropped the slogan, but not the policy. Because that's what the fucking policy was. That's what the policy was, always. He just explained the policy instead of leaning into the slogan because everyone had destroyed the slogan at that point. These things unfortunately matter in elections because elections are about marketing. And at the end of the day, we got to sell our ideas to the masses. Yeah, BLM can be construed into vague platitudes, whereas defund the police is a policy prescription. One is candy to the establishment. The other is anathema. That's a beautiful way to put it. That's the other side of this story. Because once you start making fucking demands, if you say like black people matter, yeah, everyone's going to be like, yeah, that makes sense. But if you start making fucking demands as black people, they're going to be like, whoa, know your place. And that's kind of what happened with defund the police versus BLM. But the reason why I bring that up is because BLM was also negatively framed as well. But the Democratic establishment, which was initially very antagonistic to BLM, leaned into it because Trump positioned himself as against BLM. Something I didn't realize until recently is also that people think defund means take away their entire budget. When DSA said defund the War Department, it was treated as if they were saying get rid of the military altogether. Yes. But that's a crisis not in the bad sloganeering. That's a crisis born out of the fact that nobody wants to listen to what you actually have to say. Okay? That's it. It's a crisis in literacy. That's why I brought up the Zoran example where he was like, yeah, I don't want to defund the police. But then he literally explained what defunding the police meant as what he would do for policing. Everybody was like, yeah, I love that. That seems great. I don't know, man. Maybe make a better slogan. No, that's being optics cucked to an unlimited degree. Okay? Mike from PA gave an example of a shit sandwich. Steak, horseradish, iceberg, lettuce, tomato. Calling it a shit sandwich would put people off rather than tell them what it is. I know, but this is the wrong attitude. This is the wrong attitude to a certain degree because, again, I'm such a fucking centrist on this, okay? If people were explaining what defund the police meant, we could have identified what it is to the masses, but at the time, liberals did not want it. Liberal establishment Democrats did not want it. They were cucked because they just didn't want those policy demands at all. Okay? Because people made these exact same arguments against Black Lives Matter. People made the exact same arguments against BLM. I've been around the block, guys. I've been doing this for 13 fucking years. I was there when BLM started. Okay? I was by my lonesome at the Young Turks in progressive media advocating for Black Lives Matter when liberals were yelling at us. Okay? They were like, why don't you say Black Lives Matter too? Why don't you say this or that? That was the argument. It was the same exact argument that was launched against defund the police. It's always the same optics narrative that we go back and forth on. Always. Why do you say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free? Don't you feel like that's going to scare people? It's like, no, you're just giving into oppositional framing at that point. They did the same shit. Don't say river to the sea. Don't say river to the sea. Don't say free Palestine. Don't say this. Don't say that. Fuck, who cares? Just explain what you fucking mean. But also, there is a limit to it, right? There is a limit to it. That's why I say I'm a centrist on this. The limit to it is abandonment. My hard limit is abandonment of the policies. Okay? My hard limit is caving and capitulating to right-wing framing. However, on the other side, don't get out of hand. Don't get out of hand. Don't let it get out of hand. I think, police abolition and prison abolition is what I believe is an unhelpful way to communicate, but a lot of people will get mad at me for saying this. Right? Perhaps it's my own personal bias in this. I don't know. Perhaps it's my own personal bias in this. But while I agree in the spirit, while I understand that abolitionists are at the forefront of this movement and put in the necessary tireless work day in, day out, if you're going to try and win an election, if you're going to try and fucking communicate it to the goddamn masses, people are probably going to take issue with it because they don't understand that you're talking about how in the interim, the carceral state is unbelievably violent and torturous. So torturous that other countries, other OECD nations have non-extradition protocols where they don't send American prisoners back to the United States of America because that would be a human rights violation. Did you guys know that? Norway has a non-extradition policy against the United States of America. You want to know why? Because American prisons are so torturous that it would be at odds with their constitution. It would be a human rights violation for an American who's in a Norwegian prison to be sent to an American prison. That's how insane our carceral state is. So yeah, there are, certain points that I agree with in spirit or even agree with in principle. Defund is not one of them, because defund is already defund already is like a very neutered down version of police abolition or prison abolition, right? It's not even in the same fucking planet at that point. And if we're gonna tell them to shut the fuck up about defund the police instead of explaining what the slogan is and make sure that people understand what that slogan is, because that's how marketing works, right? Then what the fuck are we doing? Hug and kiss the police? Is that what we should be doing? Is that what we should be advocating for? It feels like half of these streams for the last week have been you explaining basic shit to chat. Buddy, that means you now understand some of these basic concepts and find them to be elementary. That's good. But everyone has a starting point. Of course, that's always what I do. That's what I've been doing for years. So yeah, that's a little sidestep on the woke one versus woke two. Defund the police, abolish the police, defund the carceral state, defund the military versus abolish the military. There's varying degrees of progressive thought here, right? Some of which is unfortunately electoral poison. You gotta moderate your message, even if you don't want to temper your movement, in order to sell it to the public. You got to help them understand. You got to help them arrive at these conclusions that you've arrived at. And I suspect that somewhere along the way, many of you benefited from someone holding your hand through this process. None of us are born woke. A lot of us had very different opinions maybe a decade ago, whether they be in this community, whether they be in any other community, right? So be that person for others. Be that person that I was for you to others. That's what I always try to explain to you. And that's why I'm going to go back to what I was saying. You got to be where the masses are. You got to speak to the needs of the masses. And you got to use the language of the masses if you want to build a mass movement. And you have to be patient. You have to be understanding. You have to recognize that everyone's starting position is different and that social conditioning is a very powerful force. If it wasn't, the parasitic capital class would not be deploying it so viciously by way of mainstream media, by way of our education. That's it. It's an unbelievable tool of control. It's an unbelievably successful tool of control. So we're always fighting an uphill battle. That's why I always say I'm a leftist. I've taken L's my whole life. I'm used to it. I'm a leftist in the United States of America. I'm a socialist, anti-imperialist. You know? I feel like what you're saying, don't fall for the rhetoric that is meant for libs, but then the police are not in the bag either. You just said he hasn't been good on police. If the answer is he has been better than the alternative, how is this argumentation different from centrists that push incrementalism and resent people for not backing their centrist candidates? Because there's no market for this. But there is a market for actual incremental gain in policies. The centrists don't actually offer incremental gain at all. That's the difference. That's the difference. Like there's Like Zoran has a long way to go in terms of dealing with the problem, but policing as an institution, especially the NYPD, is probably one of the most powerful forces he has to deal with. I mean, these are guys who are around him at all times, okay? They're around him at all times. I've seen it. I've been around him. He's surrounded by like 8 fucking cops as the mayor wherever he goes, okay? What I'm saying that Zoran hasn't delivered on is not necessarily like shifting around the police funding, because they kept the head counts no matter what. So that's good. But he also said he was going to disband the SRG, which he did not. Least racist community note in 2026 on White Lamau. An essay on the inequality of human races by Gobenau, published in 1855, has classified the Turks as a yellow race, mediocre intelligence at best. The Turks are classified as dense and ponderous and obtained white traits through the practice of white slavery. Just another day on X.com, the everything app. Arthur de Gobenau was a French writer and a diplomat who is best known for helping introduce scientific race theory and racial demography, and for developing the theory of the Aryan master race and Nordicism. Yeah, dude, I'm gonna be honest, I was rage baiting. Of course, I was rage baiting with the, great replacement theory. But it's even funnier that anytime they get mad at me, I'm like, I'm white. What the fuck are you talking about? Because I'm perceived as white by normies. Every racist, every race realist loses their dang mind, dude. It is so fucking awesome. It is so awesome. Where these guys were, I mean, I've been cooking up a firestorm on a couple of these things. The socialism but rich one. I said I'd rather be successful and advocate for the poor than be a broke Trump booster advocating for the rich. Even on X.com, the everything app, 60,000 likes ratio. But the other one was I'm White Lamau. This brought all the Nazis. They were so mad. Yeah, Hassan Piker controls the media. Yeah, Elon Musk has been losing his mind. Big dog, don't worry, I'm not cucking you, okay? I'm posting it. I said, wait, who has the father that stepped up photo, actually? Because I'm gonna post that instead. Does anyone have it? Does anyone have a quick access to that? No, not the video, man. Give me a screenshot. Give me a screenshot. Hold on. Okay, I posted it. So Elon Musk thinks I'm cucking him and hasn't stopped freaking out about it since. Nice knowing you. He's gonna fucking send a drone to my house to kill me, I feel like. Is it wise to personally anger a near trillionaire over and over? We shall find out. I mean, what am I supposed to do? He keeps losing his damn mind. He's like, he means what he says. Hassan Piker, we're going to destroy the white race, bitch. That's what he's here to do. Let me troll a little bit. Guys, stop sending me the James Carville tweet.
James Carville, fan.
Wait, Piers Morgan, he hates America. James Carville versus Hassan Piker and Tucker versus Trump with Vinny Oshana. Oh, they had all my ops. That's cool. Who's there to defend me? You don't want to see a retiree shit talk you from their luxurious bed? Jank? Uncle Chunky Weigert was defending me. Let's go. All right, let's keep playing this. I got to pee.
Who despise
and we'll get to all of that.
How successful he's been. His approval ratings are high. Murder rate, the lowest I think it's ever been on record. The economy, we're going to be reading something from the Financial Times talking about actually how New York City is thriving right now based on just about every metric. But you also have people in New York City that have been saying some whacked out things. I think most mainstream voters would say.